So we have swales and berms, and it's basically water harvesting and a tree growing system. These work hand in hand. A swale is on contour. This is contour on a piece of land. This is level. You could tell because water only sits level. I'll get into this a little bit more, but you're basically going to excavate this area and you're going to put it over here. So it creates a berm. So the water that comes down the hill is going to hit this, and it's going to slow down, and it's going to be held in this trough. And then what that does is it creates this super fertile zone for trees. And it's like this nice little belt of trees that you can put on your land. It doesn't take up a huge amount of room, but you get a lot of benefit from it. So here I mixed in some of the plans from the Grandview Project in here. This is the 3.5 acre production field. Water was coming down through the middle here, basically funneling through the middle and exiting and coming in the neighbor's yard. And every time it rained, you know, soil would leave, nutrients would leave. So we kind of worked together and got a plan on the farm, and we put swales in. And then all this over at the other farm, I just want to explain, is super new. You know, it's a year or less old. So it's really awesome. You guys are going to be able to see it in its early evolution still. So you're going to have to keep that in mind. You know, things generally take 2, 3, and 4 years. Basically 4 years, things are really settled in. Trees are taking off. You know, you can't really, it looks like it's been there forever after 4 years. You know, but right now, just keep in mind, you know, this is a new system. We don't have the trees installed here yet, but we do have a little pond. And we put culverts in. So the water is collected, shoots down the culvert. I had it going here, but we actually put the culvert in over here. And the swell on this one actually kind of just keeps going, and it fills up the pond. And when the pond's full, it back floods, and the water back floods out of the pond. The pond can't accept any more water, and it goes off the piece of land. So this is we ended up altering the plan at Grandview, but I just wanted to throw this in just to kind of explain some of our tree planting. And like I said, it's been altered, and there's an evolution out there. You know, we've got some of the trees in, but we've got to get more trees in. It's ideal, like in permaculture, like it's not necessarily, you don't have like pretty, proper gardens. It can be kind of unruly. And it's for people that, I mean, you can have super tight, pretty, proper gardens, but a little bit on the wild side is a little bit more natural. And planting things with overplanting, kind of what we did here. These are actually represent trees. We don't have that on the piece of land yet, but I just wanted to include this slide to kind of show you kind of the thoughts behind the ideal kind of permaculture way to plant trees. So you have your main fruit trees, and they're basically spaced out on a 16-foot orchard spacing. And then your main legume trees are between them. And normally in an orchard, you know, you have one tree every 16 foot, you know, and then you have a nice row in between with trees every 16 foot. In kind of the permaculture method, what we want to do is plant these trees. So we got our main fruit trees, but then we're planting legume trees in between. And those are nitrogen fixing trees that are faster growing generally than the fruit trees. So what they'll do is they'll sprout up ahead of the fruit tree, and then we can come back either coppice or pollard the legume tree and cut it down. And when you cut it, it actually releases nitrogen in the soil. Its roots fix nitrogen. It has nitrogen nodules on it, and it releases. So if you do that at a certain time of year when the fruit trees need growth, it's like a natural built-in fertilizer right there. And so we kind of overplant everything, and it kind of gets unruly. And you kind of, this you can do in these little tree belts, or you can create a food forest and overplant. But you want to think about not just one tree, kind of one-dimensionally. We're thinking about what's in the soil. We're thinking about that herbaceous layer, that lower herbaceous layer. We're thinking about a higher herbaceous layer in there. We're thinking about bushes. We're thinking about shrubs. You know, we're thinking about our nitrogen fixers, and then our fruit trees. And we could mix in grapes. And a lot of times grape will wind up an apple tree, and it's like companion plant. They love to grow together. And so it's a little different. It's a little, you know, you could go out to one of these full-grown strips that's planted out, and you might not even be able to tell what's there. It just looks like wild. And I'm not saying you have to do this. You can also, you know, do your 16-foot spacing. But this really gives a head start. This stabilizes the area and gives your fruit trees an amazing head start. You really want to avoid putting a swale on there more than 8% slope. So anything greater than that is kind of like the terracing. You have to make, this is already, it's hard to see here, but look how deep this is right here. So the steeper it is, the deeper your trough has to be. And that means your back cut is steeper. And that means your berm is bigger. That means you've got to put more labor in it, more fuel in it. So you really don't, this is about as steep as you would want to put that in. And see, here's the laser level. Here's the stick. Here's the windmill. I'll just kind of explain. This is a really cool piece of land that's got some neat topography on it. And it's got 60-foot difference, basically, from the top of the land in elevation to the bottom. And what we are able to do is kind of look at it broadly and think about it broadly. And so we were able to put a pond in at the bottom to collect the water. And then, because we're out in Mills River, we got all kinds of wind. Not right now, not this time of season. It's kind of our low wind season in August, but we get a little bit of wind right now. But most of the year, we get so much wind out there that this windmill is just pumping nonstop. So it's really cool. We collect the water coming down the hill in the bottom pond, pump it up to a pond at the very top of the hill, and it's a big enough reservoir. The water's still very low in there right now, but when it's full, it's a big enough reservoir that it's kind of like our battery. You can kind of think about it as a battery at the top of the hill. And we've got these long seasons that we can pump water up slowly, collect it slowly, and pump it up slowly, and store it at the top. So that's kind of like our storage battery at the top, and then we can gravity feed the systems on down the hill from there. This is just another little sped up one, but we're actually constructing a swell here. So this is awesome. This is a tilt bucket. This is kind of rare around here. I had to get in a long line to get that tilt bucket. And most excavators, this is fixed. This doesn't go from side to side around here.
Are you operating it?
Yes. And this is Sean, and he's helps me out. He's another permaculture guy. And I usually try to get it by the month, but it's probably because it's cheaper by the month, or by the week is cheaper. But it's basically if you do 2 weeks, it's basically equivalent to a month. 3 days is equivalent to a week rental price, the way they charge. So it's probably a day. I think about it, it might be like $400 or $500 plus delivery. So we lay it out, and see, we're stopping, and he's measuring with the laser. You can see the laser right here. He's picking up the stick every once in a while, and he's measuring the depth. So this is totally level all the way from there. And then you basically want to try to keep the topsoil on top. That's the main thing. And it's kind of tricky. This farm has incredible topsoil. Rocco's been out there with the animals, and the topsoil's just been increasing. He's been grazing them, and the soil is really incredible. I mean, some of it is like a foot thick, black rich loam on top. But, this is clay. That's all clay. So basically, you want to put the clay on the bottom, and then kind of bunk the topsoil on top. And the last little bit, you want to come in there with your equipment and rake the topsoil back over and shape it. So this is your back cut. You want that to be as gentle as possible. This is flat, and this is your berm. That's where the trees go. This is this same water collection we just saw being built, but that's the morning after a little rain. This illustrates what you really want to get at, and I'll go over that a little bit more. But you really want to put cover crop, seed down, and straw as soon as you finish. So this was done the night before. When we left the night before, we had it seeded and straw down, and then here we are in the morning about to start again. Because for one, you just want to jump on it and get ahead of the game as quick as you can. Because with all this fog in the air, seeds are already sprouting. Two, you leave it, you get an unexpected rain, you're going to get erosion. So this is like one of the most important points. Cover as you go. Trees and their interactions. We kind of went over that a little bit, but trees are amazing. Trees are basically, they moderate the weather. So what we're seeing is in places where trees are stripped away, we're having more extreme weather. And trees really work to moderate the weather. So whatever we can do on our piece of land to plant trees, and to plant them on these tree belts or to plant them on the edges, is super important. For us, for the ground, for all the biology around, and then kind of for the bigger climate around us. It helps stabilize, and there's more water, and it's amazing. I mean, just in the tree branches hold so much water with mist just on the leaves. I mean, it's incredible if you measure that. So here's a terrace. Here's figs. These are like 6 foot tall after 2 years. It's crazy. They love to grow on this system. Nanking cherries, one of my favorite. It's a Chinese cherry, super easy to propagate, but not quite as nice as the big fat Bing cherries or whatever, but that's a nice little crop. Here's Jasper and me. This is our quince harvest here. Elderberry, awesome. And like I was saying earlier, perennial herbs, like load everything up with perennial herbs. I can't say enough about perennial herbs. Because medicine making, dynamic accumulator, they improve the soil. come back every year. You can divide them, separate them, replant them. Easy. Echinacea. Nettles. How many people are growing nettles at their place? Awesome. You got to be careful with nettles. Not only will it sting you, but it'll actually plant in the right spot and it'll super thrive and get away from you. So you kind of have to be careful, but as long as you're harvesting it and drying it and making tea or whatever out of it, you know, it's not really a problem. So Keyline is basically a tool that you pull behind a tractor and it does these deep rips. And it is similar where you put it on contour also. You do these deep rips and open up the ground. So this is, after you keyline, that's kind of what you're left with. It's kind of a subsoiler. It's a special design plow. There's a lot less resistance. It doesn't mix the stratas. This one has a crumbler on back. And this one doesn't have a crumbler, but you can seed from it. So it's awesome. You can rip and throw seed in the rip right at the same time. Keyline's kind of hard to explain without drawing it out for you. But basically, in the landscapes, there's key points. Key points in any landscape that you need to be able to pick out. And Keyline is basically where you have valleys are a key point in any landscape because it funnels water. Water comes down valleys, and if you keyline around that valley, you're actually, instead of it funneling down, you're keyline away from it. Instead of being totally level, it's just off level just a little bit. And from that valley, you can actually run it back to the ridges. And usually you think ridges are, which they are on top, but from a valley going on contour, you'll always go back and hit a ridge. So it's a way of distributing the water, not necessarily moving the water from the valley to the ridges. You can, depends on how much slope you put when you rip it, but basically it's a way of keeping the water where it falls. So it's a great system of trying to take care of the water where it falls. You know, instead of what we're doing with the swales is we're letting it come down the hill and then we're collecting it and then we're funneling it and using it in our ponds. The keyline you're trying to keep in one spot. So there's a big controversy, like, do we do this or do we do this? Some people are really for one, some people are really for the other. But we want to use them both together. They're very appropriate. It's a lot cheaper to use a keyline plow. It's quicker, but it's limited. Its effects are limited because it's cutting open that deep rip, and you can only hold so much water in a deep rip, and eventually you get enough rain in this area and that rip is saturated that it's going to fill up and then it's going to overflow. And when it overflows, you can catch it. You know, so you just have to there's hard and fast rules, but you have to be open to doing whatever the piece of land, it's highest and best good for the piece of land. You know, it may or may not be to keyline.
Would you keyline to your swales maybe?
Yeah, you keyline above. Yep, and then the rainfall comes off of that when it overflows into the trough. Mm-hmm. Some people are just totally against putting any swales in, and some people are totally against keylining. It's a major controversy in the permaculture world. But I'm saying just don't have those preconceived notions. One's right, one's wrong. They both do slightly different things, but similar things. They're both limited to some degree, but use them together. Make the most out of it.